In this video, we're going to talk about the NBA teams that are right at the edge of that cliff and ready to tip on over and fall into a full rebuild. Some of these teams recognize it and know it's coming, and other ones are just in complete denial. But today, we're going to let them know it's coming. Now, this season, we already know there are a few teams that are rebuilding. Portland Trail Blazers, San Antonio Spurs, Washington Wizards are rebuilding, but should probably start over and rebuild from their rebuild. And then we got the Detroit Pistons.
1 month of living in Detroit.
Here are your anti-depression pills, sir.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, what Detroit's doing, I don't know if it's considered a rebuild, more like a Chernobyl event. At this point, the Detroit Pistons might be better off stopping their rebuild and maybe just trying to reclassify back to college basketball. I think they'd have a pretty good shot at the NCAA tournament, but that is a tough one to win. All right, getting into this, the first team I'm going to talk about that needs to go into a rebuild is out east, and that is the Atlanta Hawks. Now, when we think about Atlanta, it was only about 2 years ago that they made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. They did lose to the eventual NBA champions, the Milwaukee Bucks. Coming off of that year, there was a little more reassurance that maybe Trae Young is somebody who can lead an organization and lead the team to a NBA Finals and an NBA championship. So at that point, Atlanta did go all in on building around Trae Young, bringing in the players that complement him. Since that Eastern Conference Finals run for Atlanta, this team really has disappointed. There's been now a bigger gap between the top teams in the East and Atlanta. It seems like they haven't moved up that ladder at all. Atlanta has just been first round exits and not really a serious threat to any of the top teams in the East. They did make a big trade for DeJounte Murray last summer, and I think that was something they thought would move the needle, maybe get Atlanta a little closer to those elite teams out East. The addition of Murray really hasn't done that. This season, when we look at the landscape of the East, I think the bigger problem for Atlanta is not necessarily that they're not catching up to the top of the East, but that the Eastern Conference teams that were considered to be under them and have spent the last few years rebuilding, like Orlando and Indiana, are now starting to not only catch up, but past the Atlanta Hawks. These are also young teams with young superstars who are only going to get better in the years to come. Trae Young and DeJounte Murray, while they're not old players, definitely not young stars like, say, Halliburton or Banchero. And so for the Atlanta Hawks, there really isn't this thought of, well, give them a few years to develop and they'll be better in a couple of years, the way Orlando and Indiana can wait and watch their teams grow. For Atlanta, this is really kind of your team. You're not really going to see them get too much better. The chemistry is what it is right now. Besides maybe Jalen Johnson and Saddiq Bey, the Atlanta Hawks kind of already are who they are. It's just, this is it. This is the Atlanta Hawks. So again, since that playoff run, they've had 2 straight years of first round exits, and we're still in the first half of the season with a lot of basketball to be played. But currently, the Atlanta Hawks sit 11th in the Eastern Conference. So the question becomes, if February rolls around and the Atlanta Hawks are sitting 9th, 10th, 11th place in the East, the Atlanta Hawks front office really is going to have to look at it and ask themselves, is it time to make changes to this roster? Now, if I was a betting man, I would say that the Atlanta Hawks probably won't make any big trades in season. Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, I don't think they trade any of those guys. I think they're going to let this year play out, see how it goes. But if at the end of the season they're only a play-in team, or say just another first-round exit, and that becomes your 3rd straight year of just being another first-round exit team, I think Atlanta Hawk trade rumors are going to be very, very loud come the summertime. All right, moving on, the next team we're going to talk about is out west, and that is the Utah Jazz. Now, if you remember last summer, Utah already went into a full rebuild with trading off Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, kind of the cornerstones of their organization for many years. After those trades happened, it looked like Utah was probably going to be a bottom 2, bottom 3 team in the league, but a funny thing happened. Ended up starting the season pretty dang good. Last year's Utah Jazz team, with a bunch of misfits and castaways, ended up working well together. It was pretty unexpected from basically everyone's point of view. I think even Utah was surprised with the success they were having. I think the front office put a little bit of a hold on their rebuild and let this team kind of play it out, see maybe we do have something special here. The second half of the year, they leveled off. They kind of became the team we thought they were going to be. They got to a play-in game, but lost that, so they really didn't make the playoffs. And starting this season off, in these first 20-ish games, they really are looking more like that bottom of the league team that we thought they were going to be last year. It would not surprise me at all if Danny Ainge turns the switch again and goes back to rebuild mode. A lot of the players on this Utah roster really don't fit with the future plans that Utah has. So I do think Utah will be open to trading off a lot of these players to get back either draft capital or young talented players that they think could be a part of their future plans. So I would not be at all surprised if you start hearing Jordan Clarkson's name thrown around, maybe Colin Sexton, Kelly Olynyk, Horton Tucker. I don't think they would trade Lauri Markkanen, but I think if the right package comes along, say some team comes and offers them 3 first-round picks for Lauri Markkanen, I think Utah would take those 3 first-round picks to build their future versus having Lauri Markkanen. Yes, he is the best player on your team, but you're a losing team, so you don't really care whether you have him or not because you're probably going to lose a lot of games anyways. I think Utah maybe will hold on to George and Kessler. They're young players. Everybody else on the roster, they'd at least be willing to listen and maybe take some offers on. But yeah, Utah, you're going into a rebuild, and you know it. You know this already.
So you don't have to be so mean about it.
The next team I'm going to talk about has already made it well known that they are going to go into a rebuild. They just haven't started that process yet. And that's out east, the Chicago Bulls. The Chicago Bulls have already made it public that they are looking for trades for Zach LaVine. And it is more than likely that more trades will be coming beyond LaVine, probably Caruso, DeRozan. And for the Chicago Bulls, this is the right move. You've had this core for many years of LaVine, DeRozan, Vucevic. Fortunately, it just hasn't worked. Now you find yourself in that no man's land, middle of the NBA, not good enough to compete with the top teams in the East, not bad enough that you're getting good draft picks and good draft capital and bringing in players that you can build around through the draft. So you got to rebuild. I do think this is the right call for Chicago. Trade off your stars. They still have value. I think teams will give up some good assets for players like Caruso and DeRozan. Get what you can and start over. Nothing wrong with that.
It is what it is. It is what it is.
The last team I will be talking about on this video is up north, sitting up there in America's hat, is the Toronto Raptors. Toronto does have some talented players on their roster, but they just haven't put it together that they've become a serious threat in the East. They're currently just sitting right in the middle of the pack, right in no man's land, similar to Chicago. Not good enough to compete with the top, not bad enough to be at the bottom. Been running with these same core of players for a few years now that really hasn't gotten them anywhere. It's just getting to the point where it's time to break that core up, keep Scotty Barnes on the roster and try and build around him and build a new core with him involved. Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, it's probably time to ship those guys out. And this is a front office in Toronto that was able to deliver a championship. I do think they are more than capable of sending everything out, starting from scratch. Scotty Barnes, start building around him, bring in a new era of Toronto Raptors basketball. Those are the teams that I think are coming up to an eventual rebuild. Let me know what you guys think. Do you agree, disagree? Are there any other teams that you think are on the verge of a rebuild? Thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys on the next one.
'Cause my heart can't take it anymore.